Greetings and salutations, fellow beleaguered denizens of Zon. It is I, Eric J. Chuckie, joined as always by Dr. The Boy.
Hello.
And this is the Two Nerds Podcast. And hey, before we get started, if you want to overthrow Piltover like I want to overthrow Piltover, why don't you click on some of them links in the description. Buy my books, subscribe to my Patreon, like a guy from Ohio and Rob. They're both very cool for doing that.
Like the video, comment on the video, both helps, and don't forget to subscribe.
We've also got a Discord, and
White streams on Twitch.
That's the other thing. That's all the stuff. We said the things, and now we can continue on with Arcane.
League of Legends is a game we've both been playing since 2012.
I think we started a year or two into its life cycle.
And we've both fallen in and out of it over the years. And they've redone their lore more times than I care to count. And this was fucking amazing.
I didn't have as blown away a reaction as you did.
I loved this.
But it was definitely a very quality show. I think like the biggest thing I could say about why I wasn't so taken with it is that because I am the person who loves the least popular characters, it wasn't a lot of my favorites.
No, it was very popular characters in general.
Yes. Not only those, and that was nice, but like it wasn't so much like getting to see Twitch or Maokai or things like that, where I would have been really over the moon. But the existence of this show and the quality with which it was produced makes me hopeful for the future, makes me excited for the future, getting more like this. And we are confirmed to have a season 2.
Which is nice. I hope it doesn't also take 6 years.
That would suck.
That would suck. But to be clear, right out front, if you're not someone who's into League of Legends and doesn't know anything about League of Legends lore or the story these characters come from, that's okay. Genuinely, you don't need to.
There is one tiny thing that is sort of weird if you don't League of Legends. But
I disagree that it's weird.
I don't think it's essential for the plot that you fully understand the foreshadowing that's going on here. And it's probably something you'll get eventually in Season 2.
Yes, probably.
So it's still cool. So, you know.
But, and even then, I disagree that it's a problem at all.
I wouldn't say problem as in like, you know, the entire thing breaks down or something like that. It's just if you don't know, it just comes off as incredibly oddly placed stylistic stuff.
Whereas if you know, it's a fun bit of foreshadowing.
Yes.
But that glowing short review aside, I want to kind of jump straight into the spoilers for this one.
Yeah, so consider that your warning if you don't want to get spoiled for Arcane League of Legends. Don't fucking listen anymore. Like, subscribe, comment, and all that other shit we just said.
And then go watch Arcane and then come back. Right.
Honestly, not a bad idea. I started and finished this inside of 12 hours, so...
Yeah, now that all the episodes are out, it's much easier.
Yeah.
I watch them as they came out in 3-episode blocks every week. Hey, Netflix! Look, I know Disney Plus has been doing this, and guys... You know, you might think, oh, they're the hot new streaming platform. We want to do what the cool kids are doing. No, don't do that.
I think this was a League thing because of the way they scheduled events around things. Like Friday night, we are recording this the Monday after the last part debuted. They had a gigantic fucking weekend party in Los Angeles that was like, welcome to Zon.
That's fair. Okay, Riot, don't do that. I like Netflix series because I can binge them. Don't take that away from me.
I like watching... Ironically, I like watching things like an episode at a time. Sometimes I'll wait and watch them, I don't know, in about 3-episode chunks, ironically. But that's not what I wanted from this. I just wanted to fucking watch it.
And then you did.
And then I did.
It's split into 3 arcs. 3-episode blocks that were released one week after another for 3 weeks. Arc 1 is a very self-contained story. It is very much a prequel to this series, which is in itself a prequel to the League lore. And it is a very self-contained story. It can stand on its own. It offers a conclusion to a 3-act structure and then moves on. It's my favorite of the 3 arcs, partially because it is very self-contained and tells a complete story. I like the whole series a lot, but it's the first batch is probably my favorite. That also might be partially down to it being a surprise, because I watched the first 3 episodes all at the same time, and this was so much better than I thought it was going to be. Recently, there have been a rash of good video game adaptations and takeoffs that up until recently were not the rule. So when I go into a video game adaptation, I don't go in with high hopes.
This motherfucker over here ain't seen the 90s Mario Brothers movie yet.
No, that's a bad movie.
It had Yoshi.
It's lovable, but no.
This is not a visual medium. I don't know why you're having me pull these reaction faces. I tend to be a lot more apologetic about mediocre video game to movie translations. But, I mean, you're not wrong. And this is probably the best one.
And it's just... So because I didn't go in with high expectations, that first 3 episode block had the benefit of really surprising me with how good it is.
Sure. It does help that, like, this isn't some Hollywood director has decided to pick up League of Legends for their film. It was the League of Legends writers made a miniseries.
And they did a good fucking job.
Yeah, they really did. I think the biggest standout point for me is that almost every character has a very major flaw and a very shades of gray outlook on things. Some are colored a little more crisp and clean than others. Some are a lot darker and dingier. But there's always a little bit of light in the dark and vice versa. With one largely notable exception. But I think there should be...
it's good to have a Captain America in your movie.
An exception to your rule.
If everyone is sort of a semi-corruptible, if he has high-minded ideals but is willing to do dirty work to get them done, if everyone in your show is some version of that, it's good to have a Captain America. It's good to have someone who is just a moral center, who is just a good person trying to do the right thing for the right reasons, and Caitlyn is that.
She's she's just nice and trying her best, and I think honestly her biggest flaw is her idealism, in that she believes everybody's going to,
She believes in the reasonableness of people.
Yes.
Which is a fucking bad idea.
She is a sweet summer child.
And she learns in this series about winter. But I feel like the emotional cores of the stories is the highlight for me. Ultimately.
Yes.
Because like you mentioned it, and I'll echo the sentiment that even the bad guys in this movie in this series are understandable. You get where they're coming from. They have that quintessential thing that really good sympathetic villains have, in that you understand their outlook, you understand why they are the way they are, and a part of you can't help but root for them. That's so important to have for sympathetic villains, and all of the villains in this piece have it, to a greater or lesser extent. You can understand why Silco, one of the major villains, probably the main antagonist of the series, I would say.
I think he's the worst person in the series until Jinx.
Yeah. But you can see where he's coming from. He has high-minded ideals. He wants prosperity for his people, freedom from tyranny, from oppression. He's just a psychotic mob boss about it. You know how back in the olden days they said, you got ghosts in your blood, do cocaine about it? Well, he said, I got oppressors in my zone. I'm gonna do mob violence about it.
Yeah.
Which, again, understandable, but, bro, no. And, of course, Powder, Jinx, is the tragic central character, one of 2 main characters in this series. There are several arcs. Like, there are different, story pieces. Jace and Victor and Piltover have their own little section. and then Jinx and Vi and that whole thing has its own little section of the crossover as the series goes on. But the main characters of this series are Vi and Jinx.
I feel like also that, like, whereas the story of Vi and Jinx begins and ends in this season. I mean, ends is kind of a hard word.
It establishes itself.
Yes. It walking away, if they never got another season, you would be able to play Vi and Jinx in the game and respect the entirety, the breadth of their backstory.
You could easily call this series Jinx Origins.
Sure. Whereas Jace and Victor aren't there yet.
They're not done. They're on their way.
Jace is closer to what he eventually became, the Tony Stark of Runeterra. But Victor's not finished yet.
Barely started, really. But the performances are fantastic. The voice acting is always good. The animation is great. I have seen a lot of people online mention that feels like an evolution for Western animation.
I would agree. And I there were very few times when I was watching this animation and I didn't care for it. And it's really fun to observe it and see the ways Riot has done like small animations in the past that it emulates on a grander scale. There was never a point where this felt like an anime ripoff, or it felt like bad CGI like you'd see in the Clone Wars, or
a Disney animated movie that's CGI.
Yeah.
It has its own aesthetic, and it feels like a step forward for Western animation that Western animation hasn't had in a long time. I love the very stylized looks, but grounded anatomy of the characters. They have these, they have these big, hyper realized outfits and looks and hair, but the anatomy is very grounded. They look like people in fun outfits.
Yeah.
Not tubes in fun outfits.
If you cast a live action Jace and put his face next to animated Jace, you wouldn't have the same problem as, say, for example, animated Count Dooku versus real Count Dooku.
You really don't like the Clone Wars.
Everything's better when nerds talk about it. I don't have the power to end the podcast. Don't worry,
That's
everyone.
mine.
But it is... I use that as an example here because it is not a dissimilar style of animation. It is very stylized. It's very angular.
Yeah,
it's
it
very
is very
painted.
pointy.
Yes. And it's got those painted Borderlands-esque graphics, just less shaded. That create a very distinct visual, but it doesn't go, for lack of a better term, as Tartakovsky about it. Everybody, like you said, has human shapes. Unless they're not humans, and then they have whatever shapes they're supposed to have. It looks reasonable and consistent. You can put these characters in other outfits, and they still not only look like these characters, but also look like anybody could wear those clothes.
And they look on model.
Yeah.
Which is important. They look like versions, even the characters who are game champs, and not all of them are, they look like versions of those champions. They look on model, and that's important.
Yeah.
So, from here we have sort of two paths in front of us. We can either talk about the plot in detail, which I think bears speaking on to a certain extent. It's a very interesting plot. Or we can talk about the fun Easter eggs for a League player.
I feel like you're going to have more to say about the plot than I am.
Well, let's do the Easter eggs first.
No. I think the Easter eggs are a great way to wind down. So please, take foot and... I'll jump in where it need be. Why don't you talk about how your feelings on this plot?
Okay, all right. So there's essentially like two main plots. One is the story of Zaun, and one is the story of Piltover. It is very much a tale of two cities, as it were.
Which I'm pretty excited about because for a long time, my favorite area in League of Legends has been Zaun. This should surprise nobody as my avatar is a fucking possum and I love garbage. But, like, these people, these downtrodden people who are trying their best to scrape in this neon-colored industrial mess of a city, it's just great. I fucking love it.
Especially when compared to the crisp, clean, bourgeoisie, fucking magic punk Piltover, steampunk to magic punk as the story goes on. The people from Uptown, as it were, the people from High on the Hill, who spend the majority of the series, all of them except for, really just Caitlin, and even then, that's after she goes there. All of the Piltoverian characters really turn their nose up at the Undercity, at Zaun, although only the villain really calls it that until very near the end of the series. Just like in that same sort of shitty, dismissive, fucking pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Well, if you didn't want it, why don't you simply choose to not be poor? Way that rich people often do. It is so well done.
And it's kind of funny, given 6 years ago is when this started. Man, did they strike while the iron was hot?
Hey!
What a great way to stick the landing.
But even characters who started off very, at the bottom, like Jace, who started off a fucking tribal for all intents and purposes. Even he, by the time he's grown up enough to appear in the series, really looks down upon people from the Undercity. Not like in a mean way, just at the very least by the bigotry of low expectations.
I think Heimerdinger is possibly the apex of that mentality. That he is even above most of the Pilties in that he's, immortal.
And he clearly hasn't spared a thought for the people who live in the necessary squalor that props up his lifestyle in 100 or so years. So, I love this. I love this plot. It is a wonderful tale of, political theory that the podcast isn't about, and also a beautiful tale about two sisters. And the unfortunate reality that one of them was mentally unwell and didn't get the treatment she needed, and they both were dealt the really shitty hand of being born in Poor Town.
Yeah, there's a version of events that could have resulted in Powder growing up and, maybe being a little on edge, but having a nice life. But that's not the hand she was dealt.
She was dealt the hand of having to grow up as essentially a street urchin, having her parents murdered by the police, and being taken in by Irsat's father figure, who she then, in an attempt to help, directly murders along with all of her family except for her sister.
Yes, he's been murdered. Very dead.
He's very dead.
Very dead.
Look, Clagger didn't make it through it. I'll tell you that much.
All right, yeah, he's gone.
Milo's not showing up to the next dance party.
Can I say very briefly that I like the quiet inclusion of a character named Benzo who hangs out around all the kids. It reminds me of my youth when, here's your uncle's friend, Weed. Oh, what a neat name, Weed. Wonder why they call him that.
Oh, Benzo's shop. Yeah, I bet it is, bud.
What's your dog's name, Kilo? Why's that? I'll tell you when you're older. Just brought back memories.
That's because we're from Zaun, bud. But Powder's a fucking tragic figure. Jinx is a tragic figure. And Vi is almost as tragic because she's someone who throughout the entire series keeps trying to do the right thing and failing.
I don't even know that she fails. I think Vi has exactly one fuck-up moment, and it is a completely reasonable reaction to the situation at hand.
Oh yeah, like, look, you shouldn't hit a child. As a child who is hit, you shouldn't hit children.
Even when you are also a child.
But, if they've just murdered your whole family, that's a pretty reasonable reaction from a teenager.
But otherwise, Vi could be described as someone who tried to do the right thing at every turn and still failed.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
Like, she didn't fail because of incompetence on her part.
Right.
Oftentimes, it was the system failing her.
Yes.
But she just keeps trying to do the right thing, and it keeps not working out, despite her very best efforts. She keeps hitting a wall, and she can't punch hard enough to get through.
Well, and as they say, she keeps taking punches right on the face.
You still block with your face.
Yeah. Those are the things I really like about this series, are the quiet moments of really good storytelling. The scene where Silco is in, what's his name, Marcus?
Marcus, yeah.
Yeah, where he's in his daughter's room.
The cop, yeah, Marcus.
As I was watching that, I could see it in my head. Live action, directed by somebody, some incredible, well-known name, and using incredible, well-known actors who are great at drama, and it looked the fucking same.
Yeah. In one scene, without doing anything overtly menacing, they managed to sell Silco as an incredibly dangerous motherfucker who you should not be messing with.
Yeah.
Silco is an excellent villain. One of the things I love most about him is that it would have been very easy, because, alright, so he is clearly he's the dark mentor who takes Powder in once she has killed her whole family. And Vi, as far as she can tell, has abandoned her. In reality, Vi went to go cool off so she didn't beat the shit out of the 7-year-old. And then was immediately fucking kidnapped into the darkness by the cops. But it would have been really easy to have Silco see the genius of this child who had just blown up all his problems for him, and manipulate her and have him be a very usury character. He's not. He has a moment of genuine compassion and empathy for this child in distress, and just takes her on. And by Arc 2, he's her dad. He's not a good guy, so he's not a great dad, but he's a loving father. He loves Jinx, and it's true and genuine and right to the last moment. And that's really surprising, because it would have been very easy to have him not do that.
It would have been very easy for him to kick the dog. And I don't think, honestly, the entire time he ever kicks the dog.
There is a moment where he looks into the camera and goes, "The only reason I haven't kicked the dog is because it hasn't been convenient for me to do so yet."
Sure, but in the entirety of his time on screen, we don't see him cross that line from lovable villain or respectable antagonist or whatever the fuck you want to say
to just fuckhead I want to murder.
Yes, exactly. And there are so many characters that are like that on either side of the coin. Like it's. I love the fact that Heimerdinger goes to Zahn and tries to make his best of things, and he's got that look on his face like, "I'll prove them wrong, everything's fine down here." And he gets down there.
And I'll help. They need help, I'll go help them with my science. And then he goes, "Oh no, structural inequality, fuck, I can't engineer an anti-structural inequality machine."
Or can I? Don't worry, I'll have this wrapped up in 200-300 years.
Which is his outlook through the whole series, yeah.
Pretty much. I love the fact that they do small things as well that are nods to the characters and the overall world that we do get to experience through the games.
Yeah. Like, Heimerdinger, he's one of my favorite champs in game. I love playing him, but he is consistently portrayed in the lore as a jackass. As the kind of guy who just doesn't really give a shit that other races don't live for several hundred years.
I don't know that he doesn't give a shit. I think that he just cannot
grasp it.
Yeah, there's a character I played in Dungeons and Dragons a couple of years ago who was an elf who lived for a very long time, and he ended up in a party with a lot of mortals. And this wasn't the kind of haughty, like, yes, I am Illo Longa.
He was a hillbilly.
Yeah, he was a drongo. But there was still that moment of like, oh, I'm going to do this with my life, and I'm doing this, and he's like, how old are you? And they're like, oh, 25. You're just children. What the fuck are you doing? You don't need to take on that responsibility. And I feel like it's not the same problem exactly, but Heimerdinger going,
yeah, he's very
100 years goes by like that. It's not a big deal.
And he's very paternalistic.
Yes.
And condescending.
He is very condescending.
He doesn't mean to be, but he is.
Well, it is, as you put it, a fragment of his post-traumatic stress disorder.
Anytime that anything reminds him of the Rune War, he has an actual fucking Vietnam flashback. It in the clinical sense of the word, triggers him.
It's also, I think, a result of a hyper focus. For whatever reason that he has it in his genius, he can only do what is around him and what is right in front of him. Zahn is over there.
It's over there's problem.
And it's not even over there's problem. It's just I'm not looking at it, so it's probably running fine because I built it.
Except for how it's not, though.
And you are not the only hand in that machine, and maybe you should sometimes
Most
check.
of the rest of them are dickheads.
Yes, that is also a thing.
Because that's also important, is that he's not responsible, really, for the problems with Zahn. He's responsible for the neglect that allowed those problems to come to fore, but the other counselors are the actual problem.
Sure.
They're dickheads.
I like the character design a lot. I like that they focus on Vestians. I like that now that they have a role within League of Legends and an established what they are, and that's the animal people you're seeing, that they're using them outside of a secret magic forest realm. That there are Vestians on the street,
They're just part of the world.
And that cool bat guy, I liked him.
Yeah, he was great.
He was cool, and a bat guy.
Yeah, that was also true.
What the fuck else do I need?
But I also like that, again, Caitlyn aside, but she's the moral center. She's your Captain America. Everyone in this series makes at least one major fuck up.
Yeah.
And that's good. That's interesting. Because they do it in a way that makes them not... Because the other problem that you usually have with storytelling that has that issue, that has that thing, where, everyone is got their own personal agendas and everyone has their own, motivations and they do their own thing, is normally all those people are unlikable dick faces.
Well, and that's kind of one of the things I wanted to soften about Heimerdinger, because, I love it because you can see the point of characters from the game like Ziggs or like Rumble, who look at Heimerdinger and go, yeah, you're smart, but you are not looking around you, you fucking arrogant asshole. Except that you can watch Heimerdinger as well and go, you poor man. You tried so hard.
He's trying to help. And he's very nice, and he's wise as hell, and he ultimately is probably right about some stuff.
Sure.
But, that's not useful.
I love that one person could absolutely love Heimerdinger as a character, and the other could hate him. And they would both be
fair.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's true of all the characters in this series.
Yes, exactly.
And disliking or liking any individual character in this series, perfectly understandable. I support your outlook, except for Clagger. My boy Clagger didn't do nothing wrong.
Clagger and Rio.
Clagger,
perfect characters.
Yeah. Look, Milo. Yeah, Milo's hateable as fuck.
Milo's a chode.
Clagger didn't do nothing wrong. Clagger, the best top laner in the business. 2v1. Also, fun. And now, you know what? That's a natural transition, I think, to the fun little Easter eggs that are all the way through this show.
Yeah, I don't suppose Rio's an anagram for anything, do you think?
Probably not.
No.
Okay. But Clagger, Vi, like proper Vi, the game character, wears Clagger's goggles.
Oh, yeah. That makes sense. She must have grabbed him from the tea party.
Woo, boy. I'm not that crazy.
Yeah, the Heart of Gold making an appearance early on warmed my heart. First episode, I believe, actually.
One of the first scenes, actually.
I don't know how they did it because I went back in slow-mo and kept pausing frames, but I couldn't catch it. Spoiler alert for probably season 2 of Arcane. At the end sequence when Jinx is losing her shit and she is seeing like all of the people that have betrayed her in the past and all that shit, and she catches sight of what the fuck is his name in the show?
Whomst.
Vander.
Yeah.
Swear to God.
Yeah, for just a second.
But I don't think they do. I think they just do a really good job between the sketchy outlines and how he looked on the shimmer, and just sort of superimposes him in between that thing, unless it is literally just one frame. I'm not good enough at pausing.
I think it's the first thing. I think it's they imply it without actually making it a thing they've shown.
Yes. That's such good shit.
The Hound of the Underground might be in season 2, but you're not gonna like it.
The acting, we mentioned being good before. I do want to have 2 shout-outs here. And I just think it's nice when people I like are getting work in other things that I like.
Okay.
Jace is voiced by
Kevin
Alejandro, who was Jesus in True Blood.
Oh! Jesus rocked!
Yeah! And of course, Caitlin is Katie Lung, who is Cho Chang.
Again, one of the best characters in that.
She was really well acted. And
for as little screen time as she got, she did a good job.
So I'm just happy to see those people getting work. I mean, there's a litany of good voice actors and actresses and everything in between working on this show. But, like, I'm just glad to see, some of those actors who did things before that they were kind of bit parts or maybe, C parts. And now they got a thing going for them. It just makes me smile.
Yeah. Jason Spacek, I believe is how you would pronounce that, does a fucking fantastic turn as Soko. Like, that's just really good acting.
He played a character in the Powerpuff Girls with an almost exactly the same name. It's like Silico.
Nice.
Who was a shady figure in the underground. Like, I had to find this out through Wikipedia. I wasn't a Powerpuff Girls fan, really, but...
Maybe they just let him name his characters and this is his fucking OC.
Maybe it was a nod. I don't know. But yeah, he was... I kept looking him up again and again, thinking he had to have been somebody I'd heard before, because his acting is so good, and it's such a... not a unique voice, but a specific one.
Yeah. There's another thing I wanted to shout out, which is... Dude, they do such a really, really good, empathetic job of showing that Powder was mentally unwell before the Shimmer drove her completely batfuck.
As somebody who grew up being very enamored with the utilization of mental illness as a storytelling vehicle or a character trait in fiction, and then living through this wonderful renaissance we're in where we can start to, as a society, take mental illness more seriously, it is great to see it still be able to be used to tell stories, but in more authentic form. Because each of these people is suffering some kind of damage. Whether it's all the expectations and stress piled upon Jace from 2 sides of culture, that sort of stress that we all end up dealing with, to the various characters who are somewhere on the autism spectrum, don't try to tell me they're not, and how well that's portrayed as them not being cackling madmen or women, but fixated or passionate in a way that is, not represented well socially. I love what they did with Singed. I love him.
Yeah, he's a bastard, but...
I don't even know that he knows he's a bastard.
He's a bastard because he has to be.
And because that's the only way he is. And Victor is so fucking... I'm mad. I suppose we can... It's been 34 minutes into the podcast. Let's talk about this before we go. That end was not an ending, and that upsets me.
That is the one place I feel the series stumbled, is I didn't like the end of the last episode. I understand why you went with a cliffhanger. I do. You wanted to get a season 2. You wanted it to spark conversation. I get it. I wish you had not. I wish you had let the series have a conclusion. You don't need to, like... There doesn't need to be a fucking Stand By Me montage at the end where, like, they freeze frame and Vi went on to live a long and happy life. I mean, this is how she died.
They do a montage at the end that sort of does a great job of teasing a season 2. I wish they had just gone ahead and told us what happened with Jinx's ult. And at least let us go, okay, this is where we're picking up the pieces. Because anybody who plays the games knows, spoiler, 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 they're not going to kill off Jace and Victor. Victor's story isn't even halfway over yet.
Yeah, they're not going to kill off Victor. They might kill off Jace.
I don't think they will.
I would be stunned if they did. But Jace's... Mel, as the character's name... she's not a champ in the games. And she's the one who's facing the rocket.
Can Mel's mom be a champ in the games?
Please?
I love her. She's so fucking Noxus.
She's the balls, man.
She's awesome.
She shows up as Noxus incarnate.
Oh my god.
New Noxus. Cool Noxus.
And then, like, I love the point where like, Mel's pouring her heart out and she's like, I sent you away because you made me weak. And says it in such a... Obviously, sympathize with me here.
How did you not know that was the thing?
Oh.
Every time I did something that I had to do to keep us strong, and you looked at me like I was a monster, it made me feel really bad. So I exiled you to the city of pussies where you live now.
And now I'm great. Be happy for me. What a terrible person. I love her.
Yeah, she's so fucking
I want to take
awful.
her jungle, and I want to hit people with that fucking cool-ass punching dagger. And I want to frustrate Jay sexually by getting out of the tub when he's looking. Can that be her taunt? I'm looking forward to more of Arcane. All the criticisms I have about this show are small.
They're nitpicks,
Yeah.
or they're things I wasn't perfectly happy with. I can't wait for more. I hope Season 2 is more of this story, because it certainly doesn't feel over. But they could also just go a different way and do, like, Shurima, or Bilgewater, or...
I would love to see a really good version of Shurima now that you mention it, because their lore has gotten so shattered over the years.
Or they could do, like... They could do the Demacia-Noxus conflict.
Sure.
They could set it in... They could set it in Noxus!
I mean, there's so much... And this is League of Legends, okay? This has always been the fucking case. From the obvious, most tropey version, in that the angel-winged Kale is probably the bad guy, whereas the broken, splintered Morgana roiling with dark magic is the one who has compassion for humans. Demacia is not a perfect place, and I love that. Quinn's storytelling within Demacia shows how much Demacia is not a perfect place.
Silas's storytelling within Demacia shows that Demacia is not a perfect place.
And the effect it has on Lux, who is this bubbly, happy, college-age person, like, that's so good. And Noxus, despite being severe and uncompromising and unforgiving and bearing all of the tropes of the evil empire, are made of honest men and honest soldiers who are just trying to be the best for the glory of their empire, for their people.
Kings and lords demand you kneel. Noxus only demands that you stand on your own 2 feet.
It's beautiful, and I'm so glad to see this imperfect storytelling. We did a podcast recently, I'm not sure what schedule these are going out on the Eternals. And it talked about the Eternals as icons, as your Supermans, your Batmans. None of these characters are that.
No.
All of these characters, both in personal terms and in the grander scale of the character of Piltover the city, the character of Zaun, of Demacia, of Noxus, are flawed, are different perspectives, are imperfect. And that's one of the things I love about League lore. It's one of the things that keeps bringing me back to the game, even when people call me really mean names for not doing a very good job in a bots match.
Everything's better when nerds talk about it.